I knew the exact moment our company was going to crash and burn. It wasn't when our biggest client started complaining about slow response times, and it wasn't when the coffee machine in the break room died and nobody bothered to fix it for 3 weeks. It was a Tuesday morning, 9:15 a.m. sharp, under those buzzing fluorescent lights that make everyone look like they're dying of some rare disease. I'm Logan. I'm 49 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and I've been keeping TechGuard Solutions running for the last 12 years. You know that guy in every company who actually knows where all the bodies are buried? That's me, except instead of bodies, it's network cables, server configurations, and the kind of legacy code that would make a fresh college graduate run screaming. I'm a senior network systems engineer, which is fancy talk for the guy who gets called at 2 a.m. when everything breaks. The problem with being the guy who quietly fixes everything is that people start thinking stuff just fixes itself. They think our network runs smooth because that's just how technology works these days. They don't see me working until midnight on Friday because some marketing intern downloaded a virus. They don't see the custom scripts I wrote years ago that keep our whole security system from falling apart. And they definitely don't see me coming in on weekends to update firewall rules because our automated systems are held together with digital duct tape and prayers. So when Wesley Patterson, our CEO, walked into the server room that Tuesday with a big smile and that look that says, "I just made a decision that's going to ruin someone's day," I should have seen trouble coming. He had someone with him, a younger woman in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my truck payment. "Listen up, everyone," Wesley announced, his voice echoing off the server racks. "I want you all to meet my daughter, Stephanie. She just finished her master's degree at Stanford, and she's going to be our new chief technology officer. Fresh perspective, new ideas, you know how it is." Stephanie stepped forward like she owned the place, which I guess she kind of did. She had that confidence you only get when you've never been responsible for keeping a system running at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning. She looked around the room at all of us, me, Casey from network admin, Brady from sales who thinks a router is something you use for woodworking. Then she looked right at me. "So you're Logan?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Dad's told me about you, says you're the steady hand around here." I nodded, keeping my mouth shut. I was in the middle of trying to figure out why our intrusion detection system was throwing false alerts every few hours. Probably because our marketing team's social media tools were triggering the security protocols. Stephanie walked over to my workstation and picked up a stack of network diagrams I'd been working on. These weren't just random papers. They were detailed maps of our entire infrastructure that I'd spent weeks putting together. She flipped through them like they were junk mail. "Interesting setup you have here," she said with this little laugh that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. "But looking at this infrastructure, it's pretty outdated, don't you think?" The whole room went quiet. Even the server fans seemed to stop humming for a second. "Outdated?" I repeated, taking my hands off the keyboard. "Yeah," she said, tossing my diagrams back onto the desk. Half of them scattered onto the floor. She didn't even look down. "I've been reviewing our system's architecture, and honestly, this whole thing screams legacy technology. We need to modernize, Logan. Cloud migration, containerization, microservices. Not this dinosaur infrastructure you're babysitting." She looked around the room for backup, grinning like she'd just solved world hunger. A couple of the newer guys, probably terrified of getting on the CEO's daughter's bad side, let out these nervous laughs that made my skin crawl. I looked at those papers on the floor. Those diagrams represented 12 years of building a network that had 98.5% uptime, 0 security breaches, and handled everything from our email to our client billing systems. I looked at my team, people who trusted me to keep things running so they could do their jobs. Then I looked back at Stephanie. She was waiting for me to apologize, maybe scramble to pick up the papers, definitely act like the scared middle-aged guy worried about his pension. That's when I'd had enough. I stood up slowly and smoothed down my polo shirt. I looked her straight in the eye without blinking once. "You're absolutely right, Stephanie," I said, keeping my voice calm and friendly. "If management thinks this infrastructure is outdated, then I must have been wrong about keeping our system secure and operational for over a decade." Her smile flickered for just a split second. "Well, good. Acceptance is the first step toward real innovation." "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Then the free maintenance stops today." "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, sitting back down and opening a game of solitaire on my computer. "I'm just maintaining dinosaur tech after all. Wouldn't want to get in the way of your modernization plans. Wesley, who had been watching from the doorway like this was some kind of family bonding exercise, finally looked confused. He could sense something had changed, but he was too busy being proud of his daughter to figure out what. "Right," Stephanie said, getting her confidence back. "Let's get to work, people. I want a full system audit on my desk by end of day. And Logan, try to stay busy." She walked off, high-fiving one of the interns like she'd just won something. Wesley followed her toward his office, already planning his next brilliant management decision. My phone rang 5 minutes later. It was Hunter, one of our board members and biggest investors, calling about our monthly security report. Usually I send him a detailed breakdown that I put together manually because our automated reporting system hasn't worked right since Obama was president. "Logan," Hunter said, "just checking on those security metrics. Board meetings tomorrow morning." I looked at the file on my desktop labeled Security Report November Final, XLSX. It was done. It was perfect. It had real-time threat assessments, detailed logs of the 12 intrusion attempts we'd blocked this week, and system vulnerability patches that I'd been tracking around the clock. I right-clicked on the file. I stared at it for a long moment. "Sorry, Hunter," I said, putting on my most helpful voice. "I've been told by our new CTO that our current infrastructure is outdated. You'll need to ask Stephanie for the modernized metrics. I believe she's working on cloud-based reporting as we speak." Long silence on the other end. "Okay," he said, sounding confused. "I'll give her a call." I hung up. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like the beginning of something interesting. The clock showed 9:30 a.m. The war had started, and they had no idea they were already losing. There's a special kind of quiet that falls over a tech department when you stop doing the extra stuff you're not officially paid for. It doesn't happen right away. It's more like that calm before a storm hits. You know something's coming, but you can't quite put your finger on what. For the rest of that week, I became exactly what they said I was, a guy maintaining legacy systems. I showed up at 8:30 a.m. sharp. I took my full hour lunch break, something I hadn't done since Bush was president, and at 5 p.m. on the dot, I shut down my computer and walked out the door. The first crack showed up Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk very carefully organizing some old cable documentation that nobody would ever read when Brady from sales came over to my cubicle. Brady's a good guy, but he thinks a firewall is something you build in your backyard. "Hey, Logan," Brady said, leaning against my desk. "Quick question. I'm trying to get into the client portal, but it's giving me that spinning circle thing again. Usually you just restart something, and it works. In the past, literally 2 days ago, I would have sighed, remoted into our web server, cleared the memory cache that fills up every couple days because of some coding issue nobody ever fixed, and had him back online in 5 minutes. I looked up at Brady with my biggest customer service smile. "That sounds really frustrating, Brady," I said. "But Stephanie's handling all infrastructure optimization now. I'm just maintaining dinosaur tech. Wouldn't want to mess up her cloud migration strategy." Brady blinked a few times. "But Stephanie doesn't know about the cache thing." "I'm sure she'll figure it out," I said cheerfully. "She's got a Stanford degree." Brady stared at me for a minute. I could see him trying to process what was happening. He nodded slowly, backed away from my desk, and headed toward Stephanie's corner office. 10 minutes later, I heard Stephanie's voice echoing across the floor. "Just restart the whole server. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Why is everyone so helpless today?" I took another sip of coffee. This was going to be fun. By Thursday, the problems were spreading like a virus through our network. Our monitoring system, this complicated beast I'd been nursing along for 5 years, needed a daily maintenance script that I ran every morning at 9 a.m. Simple thing, really. Just a few lines of code that told our security software to ignore the false alerts from our marketing department's social media tools. Thursday morning, I didn't run the script. At 10:30 a.m., our security dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree in July. Red alerts everywhere. Michelle from HR came charging out of her office, waving a printout like it was on fire. "Why is the system saying we're under cyber attack?" she yelled. "The security screen shows 15 intrusion attempts in the last 2 hours." The whole office started buzzing, people poking their heads up over cubicle walls like they were watching a car accident. Stephanie came out of her office looking a lot less confident than she had on Tuesday. She was holding her tablet, which I noticed wasn't even connected to our internal network. "It's just a glitch," Stephanie announced, waving her hand like she was swatting flies. "Legacy system incompatibility. I'm working on moving us to a cloud-based security platform, probably just some compatibility issues during the transition. I kept typing away at my computer. Click, click, click. I was updating my LinkedIn profile. Stephanie marched over to my desk. She smelled like expensive perfume and stress sweat. "Logan," she said through gritted teeth, "do you know why the security system is freaking out?" I stopped typing and looked at her over my reading glasses. I'd guess it's because the daily maintenance routine wasn't executed. But like you said, my methods are outdated. I figured you'd already implemented a modern automated solution. Stephanie's jaw tightened. She wanted to order me to fix it right then and there, but she'd spent the last 2 days telling everyone in the building that she was revolutionizing our antiquated systems. If she admitted she needed me to run a script she didn't understand, she'd look like a complete fraud. "Right," she said, her voice getting tighter. "Right. We're migrating everything to the cloud anyway. This is just temporary friction during the upgrade process." "Friction," I repeated thoughtfully. "Good word for it." She stomped back to her office. Through the glass walls, I could see her frantically Googling something. From the reflection on her monitor, it looked like how to stop security false alerts and network monitoring troubleshooting. "Good luck with that, Stephanie. The thing about working in tech is that everything's connected to everything else. When you break one thing, it usually breaks 3 other things you weren't expecting. And when the person trying to fix it doesn't understand how any of it works, well, that's when things get really interesting." Friday was the deadline for our quarterly security review with Pinnacle Financial. This wasn't just any client. They handled 40% of our revenue and had zero tolerance for security problems. Usually this deadline made me sweat bullets. I'd spend Thursday night running diagnostics, updating firewall rules, and putting together compliance reports that would make a federal auditor weep with joy. This Friday, I felt calm as a monastery. At 2 p.m., Stephanie sent an email to the whole department. "Security review complete. Team, excellent work this quarter. I've compiled our security documentation for Pinnacle Financial. Sending this to the client now for their Friday review. This is what modern efficiency looks like." She attached a PDF file. I opened it just to see what kind of train wreck she'd put together. It was worse than I thought. The vulnerability assessment was talking about systems we'd gotten rid of 3 years ago. The firewall configuration showed network ports that didn't exist on our current setup. And the best part, the intrusion detection summary was completely empty. Just a blank gray box where all our actual security data should have been. I stared at my screen. It was like watching someone drive off a cliff in slow motion, except the car was made of client contracts and the cliff was our company's reputation. I could have fixed it. I could have hit reply all and said, "Hey, the firewall config is wrong and you forgot to include the actual security data." Would have taken me maybe 15 minutes to put together the real numbers. Instead, I closed the file. I created a new folder on my desktop called the Stephanie Files and saved her document there. Then, for the first time in 12 years, I left the office at 4:55 p.m. Walking to the parking garage, I could see Stephanie through her office window. She had her feet up on the desk, talking on her phone and laughing about something. She looked like she'd just conquered the world. She had no idea the world was about to conquer her right back. Monday morning hit like a brick through a window. I'd actually enjoyed my weekend for once. Went to a BBQ joint, watched some football, didn't check my work email even once. It felt weird, like I was cheating on my job or something. When I walked into the office, the air was thick enough to cut with a network cable. The relaxed Friday vibe was gone, replaced by the kind of panic you see when people know something's really wrong but nobody wants to admit it. Stephanie's security report had gone through Pinnacle's systems over the weekend. Their automated compliance checker had tried to verify our configurations and found, well, nothing that made any sense. I sat down at my desk and turned on my computer. My inbox was flashing 31 unread messages. That was actually pretty light for a Monday, which told me people were either too scared to email or trying to handle things themselves. I opened our main dashboard. The first thing I saw was our client status board. Right there at the top, Pinnacle Financial, connection suspended, compliance violation. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "Logan," came Jennifer's voice. She's our general counsel, and she sounded like she was calling from inside a tornado. "Please tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing." "Depends what you're looking at," I said, keeping my voice casual enough for the people around me to hear. "Pinnacle's threatening to cancel their contract," Jennifer whispered like she was sharing state secrets. "They're saying the security documentation doesn't match their network scans. They think we lied to them about our security setup. I felt a little bad for Jennifer. She was one of the good ones, smart, honest, worked hard. But if I jumped in to save the day now, Stephanie would take credit and nothing would change. That sounds serious, I said, making sure I wasn't whispering. What kind of discrepancies are they seeing? Everything, Jennifer said. The firewall rules, the monitoring systems, the access controls. They're saying nothing in our report matches what they can actually detect on their end. Wow, I said. That does sound like a problem. Have you talked to Stephanie about it? She's the one who put together the security documentation. There was a long pause. Logan, you know our systems better than anyone. Can't you just— I really wish I could help, I said, and I meant it. But Stephanie was very clear about modernizing our security protocols. If I start messing with the configurations now, I might break whatever new framework she's implementing. You know how Wesley feels about people stepping on each other's authority? Jennifer got quiet for a minute. I could practically hear her putting the pieces together. Okay, she said finally. I'll document that we're waiting for the CTO to resolve the technical issues. She hung up. By noon, the crisis had reached the executive floor. Wesley came down the stairs, something he only did when the building was on fire or someone was getting fired. He marched straight into Stephanie's office. Through the glass walls, we all got to watch a father-daughter conference that looked more like a hostage negotiation. Stephanie was pointing at her laptop screen. Wesley was waving around what looked like printouts from Pinnacle. Then they both turned and looked directly at me. I didn't look back. I was very busy organizing the cables under my desk. Actual work that actually needed doing. Wesley and Stephanie walked over to my cubicle together. Wesley looked like a man who just found out his retirement fund was invested in lottery tickets. Logan, Wesley said, trying to sound calm but coming across more like a guy with chest pains. We've got a technical issue with Pinnacle. Their security team can't verify our system configurations. Oh no, I said, doing my best concerned employee impression. That sounds terrible. Stephanie thinks there might be some compatibility problems between the old monitoring system and her new security protocols, Wesley continued. I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. We need you to take a look. Just help smooth out the integration. This was it, the moment they expected me to sigh, roll up my sleeves, and fix their mess so everyone could go back to pretending I didn't exist. But I thought about Stephanie calling my work dinosaur technology. I thought about all those late nights keeping their systems running while other people got promoted. I'd love to help, I said, and I really would have loved to help if they'd treated me like a professional instead of office furniture. But I don't have access to Stephanie's new cloud infrastructure. If she's migrated our security protocols to a modern platform, my old school clearance level probably can't reach them. Wesley looked confused, like someone had just explained rocket science using finger puppets. Can't you just override it somehow? Override it? I repeated slowly. Wesley, I'm a network engineer, not a character from a movie. If Stephanie's moved our security setup to a new platform without keeping the old access controls, I'd need her admin credentials and system documentation to even see what she's done. This was technically true, but I said it in a way that made it sound as scary as possible to people who didn't understand how networks actually work. Stephanie went pale. Documentation? Yeah, network maps, access control lists, security policy frameworks, I said helpfully. Basic stuff for any professional infrastructure. Without that, I could accidentally wipe out the whole security system trying to fix one small thing. Wesley looked at his daughter. Then he checked his watch. Figure it out, Stephanie. Pinnacle wants answers by 5 p.m. or they're walking away from their contract. Wesley headed back upstairs, leaving Stephanie staring at me like I'd just started speaking in computer code. You're doing this on purpose, she said quietly. I'm just trying not to break your modern infrastructure with my outdated methods, I said, turning back to my cable organization project. She stomped back to her office. Through the glass, I watched her frantically Googling network security documentation templates and how to write firewall policies. The clock showed 2:45 p.m., 2 hours and 15 minutes until Pinnacle's deadline. When people panic, they make stupid decisions. When people panic and don't understand what they're dealing with, they make dangerous decisions. Stephanie was about to prove both points. By 3:30 p.m., she'd figured out she couldn't magically create documentation for systems she didn't understand. She was stuck between admitting she had no idea what she was doing and losing our biggest client. So she did what every desperate manager does when technology fails. She threw warm bodies at a technical problem. "Everyone stop what you're doing," Stephanie announced at 3:45 p.m., clapping her hands like she was calling a meeting. "The client verification process is having integration issues with our legacy systems. We're going manual. I need everyone to pull security logs directly from the server terminals and compile them into spreadsheets." The whole IT department groaned like someone had just announced mandatory overtime on Christmas. Manual log compilation was like trying to count raindrops in a thunderstorm. Theoretically possible, practically insane. She started handing out assignments. "Brady, you handle firewall logs. Casey, you take the intrusion detection data. Ryan, you get the access control records." She didn't give me anything to do. I was the legacy problem, apparently. I watched the chaos unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Brady was trying to read firewall logs that looked like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics to him. Casey was copying error messages into Excel without understanding what they meant. Ryan was pulling authentication records that included every test account, backup process, and automated system check we'd ever run. Here's the thing about manual security documentation. It requires knowing what you're looking at. My automated systems had built-in filters that separated real security data from background noise. These guys were just copying everything that looked like numbers and hoping it would make sense to someone else. I watched Ryan export login records that included our automated backup systems, which run every night and generate hundreds of login events that aren't actually people. In a real security audit, you filter those out because they're not human users. But Ryan was just grabbing everything. At 4:30 p.m., Stephanie yelled, "Send me everything!" She started copying and pasting their work into one master document. I could see her computer screen through the office glass. She wasn't checking for duplicates. She wasn't organizing the data. She was just mashing it all together like ingredients in a blender. You know what happens when you compile security logs without understanding what they mean? You accidentally document every vulnerability and weakness in your system because you're showing all the stuff that normally gets hidden or filtered out. At 4:50 p.m., Stephanie stood up looking exhausted but proud. "Done," she announced. "Sending this to Pinnacle right now." She hit send. I heard that little whoosh sound of the email leaving our server. I waited exactly 1 minute. Then I opened the shared department folder that I still had access to because, you guessed it, nobody had thought to remove my permissions. I found her email. "Pinnacle Security Documentation. Urgent response." I downloaded the attachment but didn't open it right away. First, I saved a copy to my personal drive and renamed it Evidence Security Disaster 11, 18-2024 PDF. Then I opened it. It was like watching someone accidentally confess to every crime they'd never committed. Because they'd manually compiled everything without filters, they'd documented all our actual security weaknesses. The firewall logs showed every intrusion attempt we'd ever blocked, making it look like we were under constant attack. The access records included system-level accounts that made it appear we had no security controls. The authentication data showed me accessing critical systems at all hours, which could look like either a security breach or a dangerous single point of failure. This wasn't just bad documentation. This was a detailed confession to every security problem we'd ever had, presented like it was normal operating procedure. I closed the file. I didn't say a word. I shut down my computer, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the exit. Walking past Stephanie's office, I could hear her on the phone. "Yes, it's comprehensive. Complete transparency. We believe in full disclosure of our security infrastructure. Full disclosure indeed." Tuesday morning started with an email marked emergency meeting. All hands. 8 a.m. mandatory. I showed up at 8:15 with my coffee and took a seat in the back. The conference room felt like a funeral home. Wesley was at the head of the table with Jennifer and Hunter from the board. Stephanie sat next to her father, looking like she hadn't slept. "Team," Wesley started, his voice strained like a guitar string about to snap. "Pinnacle has provided some feedback about yesterday's security documentation." Feedback. Corporate speak for their threatening to sue us. Hunter cleared his throat. He looked like a man watching his money burn. "Pinnacle's security team has identified what they're calling material compliance violations based on the documentation we provided. They're not just canceling their contract, they're reporting us to federal regulators." The room went dead quiet. Wesley's eyes found me in the back row. "Logan, you've been managing our security for 12 years. Help us understand what went wrong here." Every head in the room turned toward me. This was the moment. the corporate equivalent of being handed a microphone at someone else's trial. I stood up and walked to the front. I plugged my laptop into the projector. "I'd be happy to explain," I said, "but I think it's important everyone sees the timeline." I pulled up two documents side by side. Left side, our actual security metrics from my monitoring systems. Right side, excerpts from Stephanie's manual compilation. "Here's our real security status," I said, pointing left. 12 blocked intrusion attempts this month, which is normal for a company our size. Here's how yesterday's report presented it, pointing right. 12 security incidents with no context, making it look like we're constantly under attack. People started shifting in their seats. Here's our actual access control, left side again. Automated systems properly separated from user accounts, with all administrative access logged. Here's how the manual compilation showed it, right side. System accounts mixed with user accounts, making it look like we either have no security or I have unauthorized access to everything. Wesley's face was turning an interesting shade of gray. "The problem isn't our security," I continued. "The problem is documenting security systems without understanding what you're documenting." Hunter raised his hand. "Logan, why wasn't this reviewed before it went to the client?" I clicked to my final slide, a screenshot of Stephanie's Tuesday email calling my infrastructure dinosaur technology and instructing me to step back from modernization efforts. "I was specifically removed from the security review process," I said simply. I followed the CTO's instructions to let her handle infrastructure documentation. The silence in that room could have powered our backup generators. Jennifer leaned forward. "Are you saying this documentation was prepared without any input from our senior systems engineer?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I have the email chain to prove it." Stephanie finally spoke up. "I was just trying to modernize our reporting process. By documenting live security vulnerabilities and sending them to a client who's legally required to report compliance violations?" I asked. Hunter stood up. "Wesley, we need to talk. Everyone except Logan, please leave." The room cleared out. Stephanie was the last to go, shooting me a look that could crash a server. When we were alone, Hunter got straight to the point. "How bad is this really?" I thought about corporate politics and office diplomacy. Then I thought about 12 years of keeping this place running while other people took credit. "Pinnacle will report us to federal regulators," I said. "We could lose our security certifications. Other clients will see that as a red flag. Worst case, we're looking at going out of business within 6 months." Wesley looked like someone had just told him his house was built on a sinkhole. "Can you fix this?" Hunter asked me directly. "I can fix the technical problems," I said. "I can generate proper documentation. I can even call Pinnacle's technical team directly. I've worked with them for years. They trust me." "Do it," Wesley said immediately. "Whatever you need." I looked at both of them, powerful men who'd been ready to sideline me a week ago, now begging for help. "I want full CTO authority," I said. "I want Stephanie removed from all infrastructure decisions. And I want this documented in writing so there's no confusion later." Hunter nodded without hesitation. Wesley looked like he was swallowing broken glass, but he nodded too. I spent the next 8 hours rebuilding our security documentation from scratch. Real numbers, actual configurations, proper context for everything Stephanie had accidentally exposed. I called my contact at Pinnacle and walked him through what had happened. An inexperienced executive had documented live systems without understanding compliance requirements. By Thursday, Pinnacle had accepted our explanation and agreed to continue the contract. Friday afternoon, Stephanie cleaned out her office. Amazing how little space someone actually takes up when their incompetence catches up with them. Her stuff fit in one cardboard box. A motivational poster about innovation, a coffee mug that said, "Disrupt everything," and a stress ball shaped like a cloud. Wesley didn't come down to say goodbye to his daughter. He was in meetings with the board, trying to explain how he'd almost destroyed the company by choosing family over competence. I was standing in my new corner office, Stephanie's old office, looking out at the Austin skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It still smelled faintly of her expensive perfume, but the afternoon breeze was clearing it out. Hunter stopped by around 5 p.m. "You played hardball, Logan," he said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded impressed. "I didn't play anything," I said. "I just stopped fixing everyone else's mistakes." He nodded. "Board wants you on the executive committee. Full CTO title, not just interim. Wesley's taking early retirement next month." "Sounds good," I said. You know, Hunter said, pausing in the doorway, you could have prevented this whole mess. You saw what she was doing wrong. I could have, I admitted. But then you never would have learned the difference between real expertise and expensive diplomas. Sometimes you need to watch the system crash to understand why the safety measures matter. He laughed and headed down the hall. I sat down in the executive chair and pulled up our monitoring dashboard. I turned my automation scripts back on, reactivated all the security protocols, and watched our system metrics return to normal. The red alerts disappeared one by one, replaced by the steady green lights of everything working like it should. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just the guy who kept things running while other people got promoted. I was the guy who knew the difference between innovation and incompetence. My salary went from $95K to $145K. I got a corner office with actual windows. And I got something worth more than money: respect. Next time someone calls my work dinosaur technology, I'll just smile and show them what happens when you replace experience with arrogance. But I have a feeling there won't be a next time, not on my watch. Funny how the loudest people in the room are usually the ones who understand the least about what actually keeps the lights on. They never realize the quiet guy in the corner isn't holding everyone back. He's holding everything together. And when he stops holding it together, well, the results speak for themselves.